Hello and welcome to Lesson 4 of the Learn to Crochet the Easy Way Masterclass. This is a 14-day course that was designed to help you feel confident with the basics of crochet and to help you create all of the things that you've ever dreamed of making. I'm your instructor, Sigoni, and today we will be learning how to make the single crochet stitch. Before we get started, be sure to download my free sample of my Learn to Crochet ebook, which you can find in the description box below. For every video in this course, you will find a related page inside the ebook. This 70+ page ebook has full lessons, step-by-step picture tutorials, both left and right-handed, checklists, reference sheets, and the written patterns for both of the projects we'll be talking about later in this course. You will also gain access to all videos ad-free inside the Teachable platform. Now let's get into Lesson 4. Today we are finally learning our first stitch. Now that we've learned the very basics, it's time to actually start crocheting. Yay! So today we are talking about the single crochet stitch, and as usual I will be talking in US terms. So a single crochet in the US is a double crochet in the UK. To break stitches down a bit, there are 4 very basic stitches that we will be covering in this course, and these can be used by themselves or together to create different types of patterns, textures, and stitches. Now before we get started, I wanted to quickly talk about yarn and hooks. So as a beginner, I highly recommend choosing a solid color yarn, either a weight 4 or 5, and use the recommended hook size that is on the label of that yarn. Using a lighter colored yarn is essential whenever we're learning to recognize and count our stitches, which is something that we're going to be talking a lot about in this lesson. So let's set yourself up for success and get started with the lighter yarn and the correct hook size. If you're unsure about yarn weight, head back to Lesson 1, which is linked in the description box below, and that's where we'll talk about the basic materials. All right, once you have all of your supplies together, let's jump in. We're going to learn our very first of the 4 basic stitches, the single crochet stitch. So let's jump right in. In Lesson 3, we learned how to create a slip knot and how to make our chain. So I'm not going to go over that in this video, but if you missed it, go ahead and head back to lesson number 3 and practice your chain before you start this one. All right, so I have 11 chains here, and we're going to get started with the single crochet. If you're in the UK, this stitch is known as a double crochet. So it's the same stitch, it just has different names. This loop here on our hook does not count as a stitch. To get started with the single crochet, we're going to insert our hook into this second stitch here. So not this first stitch, this second stitch. So insert your hook into that top chain, yarn over, and pull through that loop. So you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. So you can use your fingers down here to pull on your foundation chain in order to get that stitch through. So let's try that again. This hole right here, this is where we placed our first stitch. So we're going to move into the next chain, which is right here. So insert your hook into the next chain. Now yarn over and grab that strand with your hook and pull it through that loop. Now you'll have the 2 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull through both of those loops. And so now you have 2 single crochet. Now again, we're going to insert our hook into the next stitch here. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull that strand through, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, make sure your hook is always facing down, and pull through those 2 loops. Now continue single crocheting down your chain, and at the end I'll show you how to count your stitches. going to single crochet into our last chain. And this knot here is from our slip knot, so this is not a stitch either. And this is our first row of single crochet. Now to count these stitches, you can either count from the front or you can count the top. So let's go ahead and count the top. I'm going to make a loop just to remove my hook. And we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we have 10 stitches. Now to move on to the next row, we're going to chain 1. So just create 1 chain by yarning over, pulling through, and then we're going to turn our work to look at the back of the row that we just made. Now for the single crochet, we're going to insert our hook into this very first stitch here. So when you're looking like this, it is this stitch here. So see how these stitches look kind of like a V shape? We're going to be inserting our hook into this first stitch, so you're going under both of these loops. So yarn over and pull that strand through both of those loops, and you'll have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through 2. Now again, we're going to insert our hook into the next stitch, which is right here. Insert your hook under both of those loops. Yarn over, pull that loop through. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. And again, insert your hook into the next stitch, under both those loops. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through 2. And that's how you work your single crochet. This is our last stitch here, and a lot of people miss this stitch because it looks a little bit different than the rest. So we're going to insert our hook into that last stitch, and then I will chain 1, turn my work, and again we have 10 stitches. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 10 stitches in this row. Now I'm going to continue single crocheting until I reach row 10, and then I will show you how to count your rows and how to tie off your work. Alright, so now that I've reached the end of row 10, I'm going to tie off my work. After you've created your last stitch, you're going to yarn over like you're creating another chain 1, but you're going to cut your yarn a few inches, and then you're going to pull that yarn all the way through. And that's how you tie off your work. Now, whenever you're working on a project, and if you would like to keep these swatches as mementos, you can weave in your ends. So using a tapestry needle, it looks sort of like a sewing needle, except this is a soft tip, not a sharp tip. Also, they come in a variety of eye hole sizes. So I'm using a larger eye hole because I have a bulkier yarn. So what you're going to do is thread that yarn into your needle, and then you're going to weave in your ends by inserting your needle into the stitch. And there's no exact science to this. The only pro tip I have is to weave your yarn into 3 different directions. And this is so that if you're creating something like a blanket or something that needs to be washed occasionally, then you don't want your yarn to unravel. So by sewing in your ends in 3 different directions, this will help prevent that. I went to the left, I went to the right, and now I'm going to go back to the left. And I'm just going row by row. So I started up here and now I'm down here. So now we will cut off this excess yarn here. Make sure you don't cut your stitches, of course. And look, you can't even tell that we just weaved in our end. So go ahead and do that with your next end, and that will be it for your first swatch. All right, so here we have our swatch of single crochet stitches. We have 10 rows, and I'm going to show you how to count our 10 rows. So this here is our foundation chain. That's the chain that we made at the beginning of the swatch. Then we worked our first row of single crochet stitches into this chain. So that's row 1. Here is row 2. This is row 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you can tell that the texture of the fabric changes whenever we go back and forth. And so that's how you can kind of tell which row is which. The row that we just made, this is looking at it from the front. And this is looking at the row from the back. So this is what the back looks like, and this is what the front looks like. So that can kind of help whenever you're counting your rows. All right, so now that we've gone over the single crochet tutorial, it's time for your next challenge. Your next challenge is to create this same swatch. Continue single crocheting row by row until you reach 15 rows or until you start to feel more comfortable with the stitch. So you can continue crocheting row by row for as long as you want. Now, there's kind of a part 2 to this challenge as well. My second challenge to you is to not rip out your work. All we're doing today is learning how to create the single crochet stitch. We're not learning how to make it perfect. We'll go over keeping your edges straight in another lesson. So once your swatch is finished, take a photo and send it to me so we can celebrate your beginning. All right, well, there you have it. That is your single crochet stitch. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you did, I would love for you to give this video a thumbs up, and please let me know in the comments if you have any questions at all. But before you go, we need to talk about this swatch that you just made. Your challenge today is to keep this swatch. It doesn't matter if your stitches aren't perfect. It doesn't matter if your edges aren't straight. Keep this swatch, or at the very least, take a picture of it, because I promise you're going to want to look back at the beginning and see just how far that you've come. In the future, you may be feeling discouraged, and once you see how far you've actually come, it's going to motivate you to keep going forward. Remember that in these lessons, we're not focusing on perfection. We are focusing on learning the stitch, and then that way you will be able to practice again in the future. And the more you practice, of course, the better your stitches will look and the straighter your edges will become. However, we will be talking about ensuring that you have straight edges in lesson 6. So don't freak out. Just keep your swatches, mistakes and all, and I promise you won't regret it. In the next lesson, we are going to be learning the double crochet stitch. So that'll be 2 stitches under your belt already. Again, check the description to download a free sample of my Learn to Crochet ebook. And as always, I am your instructor, Sigoni, and I will see you in lesson 5.